In the vast darkness of space, where empires rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore, there exists a species so dangerous that even mentioning their name sends shivers through the spines of hardened warriors. They call themselves humans, and they're the only species in known history to turn a losing war into total victory using nothing but their refusal to surrender. This is the story of Commander Zeftar, a decorated veteran military officer who discovered the truth about humanity the hard way. What started as a routine conquest became the most terrifying lesson in galactic history. Some say Zeftar went mad from what he witnessed. Others claim he became the wisest being in the galaxy. But everyone agrees on one thing. When Zeftar speaks about humans, you listen, because the alternative is extinction. The following account has been translated from the original Veltron military records, discovered floating in a damaged escape pod near the ruins of what was once the mighty Corvash Empire. The pod's sole occupant kept repeating the same warning over and over: don't attack humans. Please, for the love of all that lives in this galaxy, don't attack the humans. This is his story. This is their warning. This is why an entire galactic council now trembles at the mention of a small blue planet in a forgotten corner of space. Commander Zeftar of the Veltaran Third Fleet adjusted his ceremonial armor and gazed out at the swirling nebula that marked the edge of known space. His reflection stared back from the reinforced viewing port, showing the battle scars that decorated his chitinous face like badges of honor. 23 successful planetary conquests had earned him this position, and his reputation preceded him across 7 star systems. The bridge of the dreadnought Crimson Talon hummed with quiet efficiency. His crew moved with the practiced precision of veteran warriors who had never known defeat. Today would be no different. Intelligence reports indicated a primitive species had developed basic space travel in a system designated as Sol 3. The galactic expansion protocol was clear: integrate or eliminate. Commander, his tactical officer Vexen approached with a datapad clutched in her secondary arms. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity around the third planet. The inhabitants appear to have established multiple space-based installations. Zeftar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Unusual how? Have they managed to construct a defensive grid? Not exactly, sir. Vexen's tone carried uncertainty, something rare for the seasoned officer. They appear to have built structures for recreation. Our linguists are having difficulty translating their communications, but they seem to refer to something called an international space station where different tribal factions work together. The concept puzzled Zeftar. In his experience, pre-spaceflight civilizations were always fragmented, constantly warring among themselves. It made conquest simple. Divide and conquer was the oldest strategy in the galactic playbook. A species that cooperated before achieving interstellar travel was unprecedented. Show me their defensive capabilities, he commanded. The holographic display materialized above the tactical table, showing a blue-green planet dotted with land masses. Red indicators marked military installations across the surface. Zeftar studied the data, his experienced eye cataloging potential threats. Their weapons are crude, he mused. Chemical explosives, basic projectile weapons, primitive aircraft. They've developed nuclear weapons, but nothing that poses a threat to our shields. He paused, noticing something odd. Vexen, why are there so many of these installations? Most species develop a few major military complexes. This planet appears to have thousands of smaller ones. That's what confused our analysis team, Commander. They seem to have organized their military forces differently than any species we've encountered. Instead of centralized command structures, they have what they call special forces distributed globally. Small units trained for specific tasks. Zeftar's interest was piqued despite himself. What kind of tasks? Infiltration, sabotage, rescue operations, and Vexen hesitated, something they call asymmetric warfare. Our translators believe it means fighting from a position of disadvantage using unconventional methods. A cold laugh escaped Zeftar's throat. Desperation tactics. When facing superior forces, primitive species often resort to futile gestures. No matter. Signal the fleet. We'll begin with our standard demonstration. The Velterun Conquest Protocol was time-tested and efficient. Destroy a major population center from orbit. Then, offer the survivors a choice. Submit to Imperial rule or face total annihilation. It had worked on 47 different worlds. As the fleet moved into position around Earth, Zeftar reviewed intelligence reports about the planet's inhabitants. These humans were relatively young as species went, having only recently developed agriculture and written language. They were physically weak, lacking natural weapons, armor, or enhanced senses. They seemed utterly unremarkable except for their unusual cooperation levels. Target acquired, announced the weapons officer. Major population center, coordinates locked. The settlement appears to be called New York City. 7 million inhabitants. Fire. Zeftar ordered without hesitation. The particle beam lanced down from orbit, striking the city with enough energy to vaporize a mountain. Where millions had lived moments before, only a smoking crater remained. It was surgical, precise, and absolutely devastating. Open communication channels to all human settlements, Zeftar commanded. Standard conquest broadcast. His image appeared on every functional communication device across the planet. The translation software converted his words into the dominant human languages as he delivered the ultimatum that had broken the spirits of dozens of species. Inhabitants of Sol 3, I am Commander Zeftar of the Veltron Empire. You have witnessed the power at our disposal. You will cease all resistance and prepare for integration into our empire. Your leaders have one rotation of your planet to surrender unconditionally, or more of your cities will share the fate of the one we have just destroyed. Comply, and your species will survive as productive members of our civilization. Resist, and face extinction. The response came faster than he expected. Instead of panicked broadcasts from terrified leaders, every communication frequency suddenly filled with a coordinated message that made his translator circuits work overtime. This is Earth. You just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Zeftar blinked in confusion. Vexen, are we receiving surrender terms? No, sir. The message is being broadcast simultaneously from thousands of locations. It appears to be a declaration of war. Before Zeftar could respond, his sensor officer suddenly straightened at her station. Commander, detecting massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. They appear to be launching something. Missile? Zeftar asked, though he wasn't concerned. Human weapons couldn't penetrate their shields. Unknown, sir. Whatever they're launching, there are thousands of them. Wait, correction, tens of thousands. They're not following ballistic trajectories. The tactical display lit up like a festival of lights. Thousands of small objects were rising from Earth's surface, but instead of following predictable arcs toward his fleet, they were maneuvering, accelerating, changing course. Impossible, Zeftar breathed. Primitive species don't have that level of propulsion technology. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's different from before. Put it through. A human face appeared on the screen. The being was scarred, weathered, with cold eyes that reminded Zeftar uncomfortably of his own reflection. When the human spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. Commander Zeftar, I am General Harrison of Earth Defense Forces. You destroyed New York City. 7 million innocent people. Men, women, children. You think this makes you powerful. The human smile was predatory. Let me explain something about my species. We have a saying, you can't break what's already broken. For the last 10,000 years, we've been fighting each other. We've perfected warfare not as a tool of conquest, but as an art form. We've studied every possible way to kill, to survive, to win against impossible odds. The general leaned closer to his camera. Every major city on Earth has a special forces unit trained specifically for asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents. You just gave them a reason to coordinate. Congratulations, Commander. You've united the most dangerous predators in known space against a common enemy. Zeftar's mandibles clicked nervously. Threats mean nothing. You cannot reach our ships. Can't we? The human smile widened. Tell me, Commander, in all your conquests, have you ever faced an enemy that spent centuries developing weapons specifically designed to turn their own disadvantages into advantages? Have you ever fought beings that consider losing 7 million people not a defeat, but a reason to get creative? The sensor officer's voice cut through the transmission. Sir, those objects from the surface, they're not missiles. They're people, an individual spacecraft, and they're not heading for us. What do you mean they're not heading for us? Where are they going? Everywhere, sir. They're spreading out across the system. Some are heading for the asteroid belt, others toward the outer planets. It's like they're establishing positions. General Harrison's laughter echoed through the bridge. 3 hours ago, you destroyed one of our cities. In response, we just deployed 40,000 special operations soldiers across your entire fleet's operational area. Each one is in a stealth craft designed specifically for ship infiltration. Each one carries enough explosives to cripple a dreadnought. Zeftar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. Impossible. Our sensors would detect any approaching craft. Would they? Tell me, Commander, what's the radar cross-section of a single human in a suit designed to mimic space debris? How do you track something that's using your own exhaust trail to mask its approach? How do you defend against 40,000 individual attackers who've trained their entire lives to infiltrate and destroy superior forces? The human general consulted a device on his wrist. By my calculations, the first wave should be reaching your outer ships right about now. Alarms began blaring across the bridge. Reports flooded in from across the fleet. Explosions, system failures, ships going dark. The perfectly organized Velteron formation began to dissolve into chaos as vessel after vessel reported boarding actions. This is impossible, Zeftar whispered, watching his tactical display transform from an organized battle formation into a scattered mess of distress signals. No, Commander, General Harrison's voice was deadly quiet. This is what happens when you attack humans. We don't fight fair. We don't follow your rules. We don't surrender, and we sure as hell don't forgive. You wanted a demonstration of power? Let me show you what 7 billion angry humans can accomplish when they put their minds to it. The transmission cut, leaving Zeftar staring at a tactical situation that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. In the space of minutes, his unstoppable fleet had become a collection of crippled ships under attack by an enemy that shouldn't exist. As another ship went dark on his display, Zeftar realized he had made a fundamental miscalculation. He had expected to face a primitive species cowering before superior technology. Instead, he had awakened something far more dangerous, a race that had spent millennia learning how to win fights they had no business surviving. The warning bells continued to sound across his bridge as Commander Zeftar began to understand that this would not be a conquest. This would be an education in why some species should never be underestimated, and why the humans had survived long enough to reach space despite having no natural weapons, armor, or enhanced abilities. They had something far more dangerous: ingenuity, determination, and an absolutely terrifying willingness to sacrifice everything for revenge. The situation deteriorated faster than Zeftar had thought possible. Within an hour of General Harrison's transmission, 23 ships in his fleet had gone completely dark. Those still operational reported chaos. Human infiltrators had somehow bypassed every security measure the Velteron Empire had developed over 3 centuries of conquest. How are they doing this? Zeftar demanded as another explosion rocked a nearby cruiser. Our hull plating is impervious to primitive weapons. His chief engineer, a typically methodical villain named Kethfor, looked up from his damage control station with an expression of bewilderment. Sir, They're not attacking our hulls. They're targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Power conduits, navigation computers, life support distribution nodes. It's as if they studied our ship designs for years. Impossible. These humans have never encountered our technology before. With respect, Commander, Vexen interrupted, monitoring incoming reports that may not be accurate. Intelligence is receiving fragmented transmissions from our boarding teams. Before they lost contact, several reported that the humans seem to know exactly where our critical systems are located. They're moving through our ships like they built them. Zeftar's third heart began to race. The Veltron Empire had conquered dozens of species, but never had they faced an enemy that seemed to understand their technology better than they did. Give me a direct line to Captain Mordeck on the Iron Fawn. His ship is closest to the human planet. Static filled the communication channel before Captain Mordeck's voice came through, strained and punctuated by explosions. Commander, we're under attack by... I don't know how to describe this. The humans, they're everywhere. They came through the ventilation systems, the maintenance shafts, even through holes they cut in the hull, using some kind of directed energy weapon. How many of them? Zeftar asked. We don't know. They move in small groups, coordinate perfectly without apparent communication, and they keep adapting their tactics. Every time we develop a countermeasure, they change their approach. It's like fighting ghosts that learn from every engagement. The transmission cut to static. On the tactical display, the Iron Fong flickered once, then disappeared entirely. Zeftar stared at the empty space where one of his most powerful ships had existed moments before. Status report. How many vessels have we lost? 37 ships destroyed or disabled, sir, his tactical officer reported grimly. We began this engagement with 212 vessels. Current fleet strength is down to 175 operational ships. In 1 hour? Zeftar's voice cracked. In his entire military career, he had never lost more than 2 or 3 ships in a single engagement. The idea of losing nearly 40 vessels to a primitive species was incomprehensible. A new voice cut through the bridge communications. It was human, but different from General Harrison. This one spoke with a slight accent that their translators identified as originating from a region called Australia. Day, Commander Zeftar. This is Sergeant Major Collins, Australian Special Air Service. I'm currently aboard your ship, Venomous Strike, and I thought you might like to know that your crew is surprisingly polite. Most of them said, please don't kill me in at least 3 different languages before we secure the engineering section. Zeftar's blood ran cold. The Venomous Strike was part of his inner defensive ring, supposedly protected by the rest of the fleet. How did you get aboard my ships? Mate, that's the wrong question. The right question is, why aren't we killing your crews? The human's words confused Zeftar. What? See, here's the thing about humans, Commander. We're really good at killing, but we're even better at learning. After we secured your first few ships, we started studying your technology, your tactics, your culture. Know what we discovered? You're not actually evil. You're just really, really bad at understanding other species. Colin's voice took on a conversational tone, as if he were discussing the weather. Your standard conquest protocol assumes that every species thinks like you do. You show overwhelming force, demand surrender, and expect rational beings to submit to superior firepower. Problem is, humans aren't rational. We're stubborn, creative, and we have this annoying habit of getting more dangerous when we're cornered. What do you want? Zeftar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Education, mostly. You see, we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about your empire, your conquest history, your standard operating procedures. We've been preparing for this day since we figured out we weren't alone in the universe. The implications hit Zeftar like a physical blow. You've been preparing? For how long? About 60 years, give or take. Ever since we detected your radio transmissions. Did you know that humans have a psychological quirk called paranoia? We tend to assume the worst about unknown situations and prepare accordingly. While other species were probably celebrating their first contact with galactic civilization, humans were designing weapons systems specifically to fight technologically superior opponents. Another voice joined the conversation, this one with a different accent. "This is Colonel Chun, People's Liberation Army Special Operations. We just finished securing the Blood Talon. Your crew will be fine, Commander, but I thought you should know that we've downloaded your entire tactical database." A third voice, speaking with what the translator identified as a Russian accent. "Major Volkov, Spetsnaz. We have control of the Darksaber. Your navigation computers contain very interesting information about Velteron military doctrine." Zeftar realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just attacking his fleet. They were systematically capturing it. "What are you planning to do with my ships?" Sergeant Major Collins answered with disturbing cheerfulness. "Well, that depends on you, Commander. See, we've learned a lot about your species in the past hour. You're militaristic, hierarchical, and you respect strength. You also seem to genuinely believe that conquest is a form of civilization building. That's not necessarily evil, just misguided. Your point. Our point is that we're about to give you a choice. Option 1. You continue this attack. We destroy your entire fleet, track down every Velteron colony, and introduce your species to the concept of asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. Based on what we've learned about your psychology, this would probably traumatize your entire civilization for generations." Zeftar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his people. "And option 2? Option 2. You listen to what we have to teach you about species that don't want to be conquered. We show you our history, our culture, our reasons for fighting. Maybe you learn something about cooperation instead of domination. Maybe you discover that some species are more valuable as allies than as subjects." The bridge fell silent except for the continuing alarms and damage reports. Zeftar looked around at his crew, warriors who had followed him through dozens of campaigns, now staring at their instruments with expressions of confusion and defeat. "Why would you offer us a choice?" he asked. "You could destroy us. You've proven that." Colonel Chin's voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. "Because, Commander, destruction is easy. Any species can kill. But building something better, learning to coexist, that takes real strength. And despite what you might think about humans, we prefer creating to destroying when we're given the option." Major Volkov added, "Besides, your species has impressive technical capabilities. Your ships are well-designed, your logistics are efficient, and your crew discipline is excellent. The galaxy would be poorer without Velteron contributions to science and engineering." However, Sergeant Major Collins' voice hardened. "If you choose option 1, we will demonstrate why humans survived long enough to reach space despite being physically inferior to most galactic species. We will show you what happens when a race that spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare decides to focus that expertise on a single target." Zeftar felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Everything he had been taught about conquest, about the natural order of strong species dominating weak ones, had been shattered in a single engagement. These humans had turned his understanding of military science upside down. "I need to understand," he said slowly. "How did you penetrate our defenses so easily?" "Mate," Collins chuckled, "you really want to know? Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons and large projectiles. They don't stop individual humans in suits designed to look like space debris. Your sensors look for ships, not people. Your defense protocols assume attacks will come from outside, not from infiltrators who board your vessels using equipment that fits in a backpack." Chun continued the explanation. "Your species evolved as ambush predators in low-gravity environments. Your military doctrine reflects this. You prefer overwhelming force applied from advantageous positions. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a high-gravity world filled with large, dangerous predators. We learned to be patient, to adapt, to win through endurance and creativity rather than raw strength. Every human soldier carries equipment designed for exactly this type of mission," Volkov added. "Personal stealth systems, compact explosives, hacking tools, emergency life support, and weapons optimized for close-quarters combat in artificial environments. We've been training for ship-to-ship combat since we first imagined leaving our planet. Zeftar absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with everything he thought he knew about primitive species. Your entire military is organized around fighting superior opponents. Not just our military, Collins replied. Our entire species. Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we figured out how to make tools. We've never been the biggest, strongest, or fastest predator in any environment we've encountered. We survive by being smart, adaptable, and absolutely refusing to quit when any reasonable species would surrender. The commander of the Veltaran Third Fleet found himself facing a truth that challenged the foundation of his civilization's expansion. They had never encountered a species like humanity because such a species shouldn't exist. By every logical measure, humans should have been conquered or extinct long before they developed space travel. Instead, they had become the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, a species that treated asymmetric warfare not as a desperate last resort, but as a primary military doctrine. As alarms continued to blare and more ships reported boarding actions, Zeftar realized that the next decision he made would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but possibly the future relationship between two very different civilizations. The humans were offering him something unprecedented in his experience, a chance to learn from defeat instead of dying from it. The question was whether he was wise enough to accept the lesson. Commander Zeftar made his choice. I choose option 2, he announced to his bridge crew and the humans listening through hijacked communication systems. But I want to understand. If you're going to educate me about your species, I need more than battlefield demonstrations. The response came from General Harrison, whose voice had lost its earlier edge. Smart choice, Commander. We're transmitting coordinates for a neutral meeting location, one of our research stations in the asteroid belt. Come alone in a single ship. Bring whoever you need to verify our information, but no weapons and no backup fleet. How do I know this isn't a trap? Sergeant Major Collins answered with what sounded like genuine amusement. Mate, we've already captured half your fleet and could destroy the rest in the next 2 hours. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be breathing vacuum. This is about education, not elimination. 3 hours later, Zeftar found himself aboard a human space station that defied every expectation he'd formed about their technological capabilities. The structure was massive, clearly constructed over decades, and equipped with technologies that rivaled anything in the Veltaran Empire. General Harrison met him at the airlock, a scarred, middle-aged human whose calm demeanor belied the tactical genius Zeftar had witnessed. Welcome to Armstrong Station, Commander. Thank you for coming. This facility, Zeftar gestured at the sophisticated equipment surrounding them. How long have you been building it? 43 years. We started construction 2 years after we detected your first radio transmissions. We've been preparing for contact with galactic civilization for most of a human generation. They walked through corridors lined with displays showing tactical analyses, ship designs, and detailed studies of various galactic species. Zeftar realized he was looking at the most comprehensive intelligence operation he'd ever encountered. You've been studying us for decades, he said, not really asking. Not just you. Every species we could identify through intercepted communications. We know about the Korvaxi hegemony, the Zinthri Collective, the Plasma Courts, and 47 other galactic civilizations. Harrison stopped in front of a massive display showing galactic political boundaries. We also know about their conquest patterns, military doctrines, and standard first contact protocols. Zeftar stared at the display in amazement. The level of detail was staggering. Trade routes, fleet compositions, political relationships. How could you possibly gather this much information? Patience and paranoia, Commander. Two of humanity's defining characteristics. Harrison led him into a conference room where several other humans waited. Let me introduce you to the people who've been preparing for this day. The introductions revealed the scope of human preparation. Dr. Sarah Kim, xenopsychologist, had spent 20 years analyzing alien behavioral patterns. Colonel James Murphy, strategic analyst, had developed tactical responses to 43 different conquest scenarios. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, technology specialist, had reverse-engineered galactic technology standards from intercepted technical transmissions. "This is impossible," Zeftar said after hearing their credentials. "No single species could coordinate such a comprehensive intelligence operation." "That's where you're wrong about humans," Dr. Kim replied. "We're probably the only species in the galaxy that spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare against our own kind before we ever encountered aliens. We know how to organize, coordinate, and share intelligence across global networks." General Harrison activated a holographic display. "Let me show you something, Commander. This is human military history over the past century." The display showed a timeline of conflicts, innovations, and developments. Zeftar watched in fascination as humanity's military capabilities evolved at an extraordinary pace. In 1914, our most advanced weapons were single-shot rifles and horse-drawn artillery. By 1945, we had developed radar, jet aircraft, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons. By 2000, we had satellite networks, precision-guided munitions, and global communication systems. We accomplished more military innovation in 100 years than most species achieve in millennia. Why? Zeftar asked. What drove such rapid development? Colonel Murphy answered grimly. Necessity. We were fighting each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons. Every innovation in offense led to innovation in defense, which led to innovation in counteroffense. We created an evolutionary pressure that accelerated our military development exponentially. Dr. Tanaka added, by the time we detected galactic civilizations, we had already developed technologies specifically designed to fight opponents with superior resources. Stealth systems, asymmetric tactics, distributed command structures, rapid adaptation protocols. We'd been preparing for galactic warfare without knowing it. Zeftar studied the timeline, trying to understand the implications. Your entire civilization developed around conflict. Not around conflict, Dr. Kim corrected. Around survival despite conflict. Humans are naturally curious and social, but we're also incredibly good at preparing for worst-case scenarios. When we realized we weren't alone in the galaxy, our first assumption was that other species might be hostile. So you prepared for war. We prepared for everything, General Harrison said. War, diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation. But, yes, we gave special attention to defensive scenarios. Human psychology assumes that if something bad can happen, it probably will. The general activated another display showing current human military capabilities. Zeftar's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. Stealth ships, capable of operating undetected for months. Soldiers trained specifically for zero-gravity combat. Weapons systems designed to disable rather than destroy. Communication networks that functioned even under total electromagnetic warfare conditions. You have capabilities that rival any galactic military, Zeftar observed. We have capabilities that exceed most galactic militaries, Colonel Murphy corrected, because we designed them specifically to fight technologically superior opponents. Every human soldier carries equipment that would be considered special operations gear by galactic standards. But why offer cooperation instead of conquest? Zeftar asked the question that had been troubling him since the first human transmission. You could have destroyed my fleet. You could probably challenge the entire Velteron Empire. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Because conquest isn't our goal, Commander. Survival is. We've learned that the best way to survive in a hostile universe is to turn potential enemies into allies. We'd rather have friends and subjects. Besides, Sergeant Major Collins added, entering the conference room, we studied your species' psychology. Velterons respect strength, but respond well to fair treatment. You're hierarchical, but not sadistic. You conquer because you believe it brings order, not because you enjoy suffering. That makes you potential partners rather than inevitable enemies. Zeftar processed this information, tried to reconcile it with everything he'd been taught about galactic expansion. You're saying you could have destroyed us, but chose not to because you thought we might be reasonable. We're saying we chose to demonstrate our capabilities in a way that would earn your respect without unnecessarily killing your people, General Harrison replied. Human military doctrine emphasizes minimum necessary force to achieve objectives. Dead enemies can't become allies. What about other species? Zeftar asked. Have you made contact with other galactic civilizations? The humans exchanged glances before Dr. Tanaka answered. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about the Corvashi Empire's expansion into the Outer Rim. We've tracked the Zenthri Collective's conflicts with the Plasma Courts. We understand the political situation. And we've decided to make our first official contact with your species because our analysis indicates that Veltarans are among the most reasonable galactic civilizations. You're militaristic, but not genocidal. You're expansion-focused, but not purely destructive. You seem like the best choice for initial diplomatic relations. Zeftar felt the weight of that statement. You chose us for first contact. We chose you for first contact, General Harrison confirmed. Though we expected the interaction to be more diplomatic and less explosive, our intelligence indicated that Veltarans typically attempted negotiation before resorting to orbital bombardment. Your intelligence was wrong, Zeftar said quietly. Standard protocol is demonstration of force followed by surrender demands. Negotiation only occurs if the target species proves capable of meaningful resistance. Which we did, Colonel Murphy observed. Quite thoroughly. The irony wasn't lost on Zeftar. The humans had demonstrated exactly the kind of resistance that would earn Veltaran respect, but they'd done it in a way that completely overwhelmed standard Imperial responses. They'd turned the conquest protocol into a diplomatic opening. What happens now, he asked. Now, General Harrison stood and activated a new display. We show you what human civilization looks like when we're not preparing for war. Because, Commander, if you think our military capabilities are impressive, wait until you see what we can accomplish when we're working together toward peaceful goals. The display showed images of human cities, universities, research facilities, and cultural centers. Art, music, literature, scientific achievements, technological innovations developed for pure exploration rather than military advantage. It was a side of humanity that Zeftar realized he hadn't seen during their military demonstration. Your species creates beauty as well as weapons, he asked, studying images of human architecture and art. Our species creates beauty because of weapons, Dr. Kim replied. When you spend millennia fighting each other, you develop a deep appreciation for peace. Human culture exists as a counterbalance to human warfare. We create art, music, and literature specifically to remind ourselves why survival matters. Zeftar found himself looking at humanity from an entirely different perspective. They weren't just dangerous predators who had somehow achieved spaceflight. They were a complex civilization that had learned to balance incredible destructive capability with equally impressive creative achievement. I need to report this to my superiors, he said finally. We understand, General Harrison replied. But, Commander, before you leave, there's one more thing you need to see. Because if you're going to report on humanity to the Veltaran Empire, you should understand exactly what kind of species you've encountered. The final display showed something that made Zeftar's blood run cold. Detailed plans for human expansion into galactic civilization. Not conquest plans, but integration strategies. Trade proposals, cultural exchange programs, technological cooperation agreements, and defensive alliance structures. You're not just surviving contact with galactic civilization, Zeftar realized. You're planning to become part of it. We're planning to improve it, General Harrison corrected. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Commander. Species like the Corvashi Empire are genuinely hostile. The Zenthri Collective practices actual genocide. The Plasma Courts enslave entire populations. Reasonable species like yours are in the minority. What are you suggesting? We're suggesting an alliance. Your military doctrine combined with our asymmetric capabilities. Your technological infrastructure combined with our adaptability. Your experience with galactic politics combined with our fresh perspective. Zeftar stared at the humans around the conference table, finally understanding the true scope of what they were proposing. They weren't just offering peace, they were offering partnership in reshaping galactic civilization itself. The question was whether the Veltaran Empire would be wise enough to accept. The journey back to Veltaran space took 18 standard galactic days. During that time, Zeftar struggled with how to present his report to the Imperial Council. How do you explain to a civilization built on military supremacy that you've encountered a species that makes warfare obsolete through superior preparation? The data crystals containing human technological specifications sat in his personal safe like unexploded ordnance. Dr. Tanaka had been generous with information, too generous, perhaps. The humans had shared shield harmonics, propulsion theories, and metallurgical advances that could revolutionize Veltaran shipbuilding. They'd also included detailed analyses of every major galactic civilization's military capabilities. Commander, Vexen approached his quarters as they entered the home system. The Imperial Council has requested an immediate briefing upon our arrival. They're concerned about our extended absence and the reports of first contact. Zeftar looked up from a human cultural database he'd been studying. Concerned about what, specifically? Well, sir, your initial reports mentioned encountering primitive resistance. When you failed to report conquest completion within standard timeframes, they assumed the worst. Admiral Korthax has been mobilizing the 1st and 4th fleets for a punitive expedition. The implications hit Zeftar like a plasma blast. How many ships? Approximately 800 vessels, sir. The largest fleet deployment in Imperial history. They're planning to sterilize the entire system and use it as an example to other species considering resistance. Zeftar's 3 hearts began racing. 800 ships against a species that had neutralized his fleet of 200 without losing a single soldier. The humans had demonstrated remarkable restraint during their first encounter, but facing total planetary annihilation would likely trigger a very different response. Send an immediate priority transmission to Admiral Korthax, Zeftar ordered. Tell him to halt fleet deployment pending my briefing. Emergency Protocols, Command Authority 7. Sir, Vexen's confusion was evident. Command Authority 7 hadn't been used in over a century. It was reserved for situations that threatened the entire Empire. Do it now, Vexen, and pray to the 7 suns that he listens. The Imperial Council convened in the great amphitheater of Veltar Prime, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of the triple star system that had birthed their civilization. Zeftar stood in the center of the speaking circle, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the Empire. His report would shape the future of both species. Supreme Admiral Morgeth, architect of 43 successful conquests, spoke first. Commander Zeftar, you have caused considerable disruption with your unconventional requests. Explain why you believe we should delay the punitive expedition against this primitive species. Supreme Admiral, honored counselors, Zeftar began, the species known as humans are not primitive. They represent perhaps the most dangerous military civilization we have ever encountered. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Counselor Vextoric, the Empire's foremost military strategist, leaned forward. Explain your assessment, Commander. Our intelligence indicated a species that had barely achieved orbital flight. Our intelligence was catastrophically incomplete. Zeftar activated the holographic display, showing images of human technology. The humans have been monitoring galactic communications for over 60 years. They've studied our ships, our tactics, our conquest patterns. They've been preparing for contact with our civilization longer than most of our officers have been alive. He played recordings from the battle, showing how human infiltrators had systematically disabled his fleet. The council watched in shocked silence as ship after ship fell to attackers that seemed to appear from nowhere. "This is impossible," Admiral Korthax declared. "No species achieves this level of tactical sophistication without centuries of galactic warfare experience." "That's where you're wrong, Admiral." Zeftar displayed the human military history timeline. They achieved this sophistication by fighting each other for 10,000 years. They developed asymmetric warfare techniques because they were constantly facing opponents with superior resources. The data spoke for itself. Human innovation rates, technological advancement curves, organizational complexity. All of it pointed to a species that had compressed millennia of military evolution into a few centuries of intensive development. Counselor Zareth, the Empire's chief technologist, studied the specifications Dr. Tanaka had provided. "Commander, these technological analyses, they appear to be accurate assessments of our ship designs. How could they possibly know our internal systems configurations?" They reverse-engineered them from intercepted maintenance communications, construction broadcasts, and technical manuals. "The humans have been studying us longer than we've been aware of their existence." Supreme Admiral Morgeth's expression darkened. "Are you suggesting that this species poses a genuine threat to the Empire?" "I'm suggesting that 800 ships will not be enough," Zeftar replied bluntly. "The humans demonstrated the ability to neutralize my fleet of 200 vessels using equipment that fit into individual spacecraft. Their entire military doctrine is based on defeating numerically and technologically superior opponents." "Preposterous," Admiral Korthax scoffed. "No species can overcome such overwhelming force differentials." "Admiral, with respect, you're thinking like a Veltron. You assume that warfare is about applying superior force to achieve victory. Humans assume that warfare is about making victory too expensive for opponents to sustain." Zeftar pulled up strategic analyses the humans had shared. They've studied every major galactic conflict of the past 3 centuries. They know exactly how to counter fleet-based tactics. He showed them human preparations, asteroid mining operations that could produce millions of autonomous weapons platforms, stealth technologies that rendered conventional sensors useless, and infiltration capabilities that made large fleet formations into liabilities rather than advantages. "But there's something more important than their military capabilities," Zeftar continued. "They offer me a choice. They could have destroyed my fleet entirely, but they chose demonstration over annihilation. They're not interested in conquest. They're interested in alliance." The council chamber erupted in discussion. The concept of an alliance with a species they'd intended to conquer was unprecedented in Imperial history. Counselor Vex Torek raised his hand for silence. "Commander, you're suggesting that we ally with a species that humiliated our fleet?" "I'm suggesting that we ally with a species that could have destroyed our fleet, but chose not to. There's a significant difference." Zeftar activated the final series of displays. Human proposals for technological cooperation, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. They're offering us access to technologies we haven't even imagined. Stealth systems, adaptive materials, information networks, and strategic doctrines that could revolutionize Imperial military capabilities. In exchange, they want access to our galactic knowledge, our logistics networks, and our diplomatic relationships. Supreme Admiral Morgeth studied the proposals carefully. "What guarantee do we have that they won't use our knowledge against us?" "The same guarantee we're offering them," Zeftar replied. "Mutual benefit. They've demonstrated that they can study our capabilities without our cooperation. Working with them gives us the opportunity to understand their capabilities in return." "And if we refuse?" Counselor Zareth asked. "Then we face a species that has spent 60 years preparing specifically to fight galactic civilizations like ours. A species that has already demonstrated the ability to neutralize our best fleet using a fraction of their available resources." The council fell silent as the implications sank in. They were facing something unprecedented in Imperial history, a species that couldn't be conquered through conventional means, but might be willing to cooperate through unconventional ones. Admiral Korthax broke the silence. Commander, you've had more direct contact with these humans than anyone else in the Empire. What is your personal assessment of their intentions? Zeftar had been dreading this question, but he answered honestly. Admiral, I believe they're offering us the opportunity to be partners instead of enemies. They've studied our psychology and concluded that Velterans can be reasonable when presented with facts rather than threats. And if they're wrong about our reasonableness, then they'll demonstrate why they survived long enough to develop space travel despite being physically inferior to every major predator on their planet. They'll show us why a species with no natural weapons, no armor, and no enhanced senses became the dominant life form on a world filled with creatures specifically evolved to kill them. The weight of that statement settled over the council chamber. Every counselor understood the implications. Humanity hadn't just survived, they dominated their environment through intelligence, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Supreme Admiral Morgoth made the decision that would reshape galactic history. Commander Zeftar, you will return to human space as our official diplomatic representative. You will negotiate preliminary agreements for technological and strategic cooperation. And you will make it clear that the Velteran Empire is prepared to treat humanity as equals rather than subjects. Yes, Supreme Admiral. However, Morgoth continued, you will also make it clear that if humanity proves treacherous, the Empire will respond with the full force of our military capabilities. 800 ships may not be enough, but we can marshal 8,000 if necessary. Zeftar nodded, though he privately doubted that even 8,000 ships would be sufficient against a species that had spent decades preparing for exactly that scenario. As he prepared to depart for the return journey to human space, Zeftar reflected on the irony of his situation. He had begun this mission as a conqueror and was returning as a diplomat. The humans had accomplished something no previous species had managed. They had changed Velteran policy without firing a shot in anger. The question now was whether this unprecedented alliance could survive the challenges that lay ahead. Because if Zeftar had learned anything about humans, it was that they were always preparing for the next crisis, and the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. 3 days later, as his ship crossed into human space, Zeftar received a transmission from General Harrison. Welcome back, Commander. We've been expecting you. There's something we need to discuss about the Korvashi Empire. It seems they've been planning their own expansion into this sector, and we thought you might like to know about it before they arrive. Zeftar smiled, an expression that felt surprisingly natural. The humans had already begun sharing intelligence that could benefit Velteran interests. Perhaps this alliance would work after all. The real test would come when they faced their first mutual enemy. 2 years after first contact, the warning came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Zeftar, his new title still felt strange, was reviewing joint human-Velteran patrol reports when the emergency transmission arrived. The signal originated from deep space, beyond the established trade routes, transmitted on frequencies that only the most sophisticated listening posts could detect. Ambassador, his human counterpart, Dr. Sarah Kim, materialized on the holographic display from her office on Mars. We're picking up the same transmission. It's definitely Korvashi origin, but the encryption is unlike anything in our database. Zeftar studied the signal pattern with growing concern. It's a military frequency, high-priority tactical communication. But why would the Korvashi be operating in this sector? The answer came 3 hours later when a badly damaged Zenthri vessel limped into the joint defense perimeter around human space. The ship's hull was scarred by weapons fire, its engines barely functional, and its crew of 6 reduced to a single surviving pilot. Captain Morval of the Zenthri Collective was a being Zeftar had encountered before, a professional soldier whose species had been fighting the Korvashi Empire for over a century. Seeing her ship in such condition was alarming enough. Her message was terrifying. The Korvashi have developed something new, she reported from the medical bay aboard the joint station Armstrong Veltar. They've been testing it on outer rim colonies. Entire star systems gone. Not conquered, not enslaved. Gone. Dr. Kim leaned forward in her chair. Define gone, Captain. Stellar collapse. They found a way to destabilize stars, trigger premature supernovas. Complete sterilization of everything within 12 light years. They tested it on the Zirian system 3 weeks ago. For billion Zenthri civilians. Dead in minutes. The conference room fell silent. Even by galactic standards, such weapons were considered beyond the pale of civilized warfare. Why target this sector? Zeftar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Captain Morval's expression was grim. Because of your alliance. The Korvashi see human-Veltarun cooperation as a threat to their expansion plans. They've classified your species as a contamination factor that needs to be eliminated before it spreads. Dr. Kim activated her communication system. General Harrison, Priority Alpha. We need immediate strategic consultation. Within hours, the Joint Defense Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from both species gathered around tactical displays showing Korvashi fleet movements. The intelligence was sobering. They're mobilizing everything, General Harrison reported, his usual calm demeanor strained. Intelligence indicates 12,000 ships, supported by the new stellar destabilization weapons. They're not planning conquest, they're planning extermination. Admiral Korthax, now serving as Veltarun military liaison, studied the fleet compositions. 12,000 ships. Even with our combined forces, we have perhaps 800 vessels. The tactical mathematics are challenging. The mathematics change when you factor in human strategic doctrine, Colonel Murphy replied, pulling up tactical analyses. We've been expecting this. Our species have spent the last 2 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Zeftar looked around the room, noting the calm expressions on human faces contrasted with the obvious concern of his Veltarun colleagues. You've been preparing for war with the Korvashi Empire? We've been preparing for war with someone, Dr. Tanaka corrected. Human psychology assumes that success makes you a target. The moment our alliance became public, we started planning for retaliation from species that wouldn't want our cooperation model to spread. She activated a holographic display showing defensive preparations that took Zeftar's breath away. In 2 years of alliance, the humans hadn't just been sharing technology, they'd been revolutionizing the entire concept of galactic defense. Automated defense networks throughout both territories, she explained. Stealth weapon platforms in every major asteroid field. Rapid response fleets using human mobility doctrine and Veltarun firepower. And special deployment units trained specifically for deep space infiltration missions. How many special deployment units? Admiral Korthax asked. Approximately 200,000 soldiers, General Harrison replied casually. Each equipped with equipment designed specifically for long-range stealth operations against superior forces. The number stunned Zeftar. 200,000? How did you train that many infiltration specialists? We didn't train them, Colonel Murphy smiled grimly. We recruited them from existing human military units. Remember, Commander, now Ambassador. Every human soldier is trained for asymmetric warfare. We just gave them better equipment and longer-range transportation. Dr. Kim pulled up strategic projections. The Korvashi are thinking conventionally. Massive fleet, overwhelming firepower, quick decisive victory. They're planning to destroy our primary worlds and break our alliance through shock tactics. What they're not planning for, General Harrison continued, is 200,000 individual infiltration specialists scattered across their entire empire, all activated simultaneously when their main fleet is committed to attacking our systems. The scope of human planning became clear to Zeftar. While the Korvashi prepared for conventional warfare, humanity had spent 2 years infiltrating their entire civilization. You've placed soldiers throughout Korvashi space. We've placed soldiers throughout the space of everyone who might threaten our alliance, Dr. Kim replied matter-of-factly. The Plasma Courts, the Mordian Syndicate, the Far-Reach Confederacy. Human doctrine assumes that if you're not preparing for war with everyone, you're not prepared for war with anyone. Captain Morval, who had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement, finally spoke. You're talking about coordinated strikes across multiple galactic empires. That's not defense. That's the complete reorganization of galactic power structures. Yes, General Harrison agreed. It is. The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The Human-Veteran Alliance hadn't just been preparing to survive Corvashi aggression. They've been preparing to end the age of imperial expansion through overwhelming military force. What about the stellar destabilization weapons? Zeftar asked. Dr. Tanaka smiled with an expression that reminded him why his species had learned to respect human capabilities. We've been studying Corvashi research for 18 months. We know how their star killers work. We also know how to disable them. You've developed countermeasures? We've developed improvements, she corrected. More precise, more controllable, and completely undetectable until activation. Every Corvashi ship carrying stellar destabilization equipment is about to experience catastrophic system failures. Admiral Korthax leaned back in his chair, processing the scope of human preparation. How long have you been planning this? Since the day after first contact, General Harrison replied. Human strategic doctrine is based on the assumption that any new relationship will eventually face a major crisis. We've been preparing for that crisis since we knew it would come. The next phase of the briefing revealed the full extent of Allied preparation. Joint fleets using hybrid technology, communication networks that functioned during total warfare, supply lines designed to support extended campaigns across galactic distances, and, most importantly, coordination protocols that allowed both species to function as a unified military force. The Corvashi expect to face two separate species defending their individual territories, Colonel Murphy explained. They're going to encounter something unprecedented in galactic history, a genuine military alliance between species with completely different strategic doctrines. What's our timeline? Zeftar asked. Corvashi main fleet will reach the outer defense perimeter in 6 days, General Harrison replied. Our infiltration teams will begin operations in 4 days. By the time their fleet arrives, the Corvashi Empire will already be falling apart from internal sabotage. Dr. Kim activated the final display, a comprehensive map of galactic civilization showing planned operations across dozens of star systems. Gentlemen, what you're looking at is the end of the Imperial Age. After this week, no single species will have the capability to conquer others through pure military force. You're reshaping galactic civilization, Captain Morval observed. We're making galactic civilization safer for species that prefer cooperation to conquest, Dr. Kim corrected. The Corvashi, the Plasma Courts, and other aggressive empires will still exist. They just won't be able to expand through military conquest anymore. As the briefing concluded and preparations began for the coming conflict, Zeftar reflected on the transformation his life had undergone. 2 years ago, he had been a conqueror representing an expanding empire. Now, he was a diplomat helping to create a new model for galactic civilization. The humans had done more than defend themselves. They had created a framework for ending the cycle of imperial expansion that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. 3 days later, as Corvashi advanced scouts entered the defense perimeter and promptly disappeared, Zeftar received a message from the Zenthri Collective, the Far Reach Confederacy, and 17 other civilizations. They all contained the same basic request. We understand that humanity is accepting new members in their alliance. We would like to discuss terms for cooperation. The message that would echo through galactic history for centuries came from General Harrison to the Corvashi Fleet Command as their invasion force realized that their stellar weapons had been turned against their own ships. This is General Harrison of the Human-Veteran Alliance. You attacked our worlds because you feared our example would spread. You were right to be afraid. Any species that chooses cooperation over conquest is welcome to join us. Any species that chooses conquest over cooperation will discover why humans survived long enough to reach space. The Corvashi fleet surrendered 6 hours later. Within a year, 43 species had requested alliance membership. The age of galactic empires built on military conquest was over, replaced by an age of cooperation enforced by the most dangerous military doctrine any species had ever developed: the absolute refusal to allow aggression to succeed. And, in his personal log, Ambassador Zeftar wrote the warning that would become required reading at every galactic military academy: don't attack humans. They don't fight wars to win battles. They fight wars to reshape civilizations. They don't seek victory through superior force. They seek victory through superior preparation. Most importantly, they never fight alone. If you attack humanity, you're not facing one species. You're facing everyone who believes that cooperation is better than conquest. And in a galaxy full of species tired of being conquered, that's almost everyone.